Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm your host, Erin Urban, certified career strategist and executive coach, helping driven, successful professionals remove career roadblocks to achieve more impact, influence, and income. I'm very pleased to speak to you today about how to network in the new normal. This is a big question on many people's minds. As a matter of fact, over all the speaking events I've done in the past many weeks, that has been the number one question I get. How do I leverage my network when we're all disconnected in isolated conditions, remote work, we're doing virtual meetings? How in the world can I network in these challenging, crazy COVID times? Well, that's exactly what we'll talk about today. In fact, we will discuss how to manage and connect with your network, expand your network, leverage that network, reach out to people you've never spoken to before in your life, and most importantly, make those connections fruitful and worthwhile for you and your career growth. So no matter whether you are job seeking or whether you're perfectly happy in the career you have or the role that you currently have, we will discuss how to leverage your network, what that looks like, how to reach out to people. Maybe that's an email, maybe that's an in-mail. We'll discuss all the things about how to leverage your network in disrupted times. Now, if you've never seen my smiling face before, my name is Coach E. Urban. You can find out more about me right down here at coacheurban.com. I'm a certified career strategist and executive coach. And I've spoken so much this week, I can't talk anymore. But I'm really excited to talk to you today. And if you'd like to hear more about career growth strategies, tips, tricks, insights, and how to elevate your career, please do check out the Career Coffee Chat podcast as well on all the major channels. And if you're just tuning in, say hi, say your name, say where you're from. I'd love to say hi and welcome you to the show. And if you have any questions, please do put it in the chat in the comments, because I definitely want to answer your questions. This is an interactive show, so we'll be pausing from time to time to answer those questions. So let's get started. What is it that will help you leverage your network during very disconnected times? So leveraging your network during the hashtag new normal. Hi, Jesse. Glad to see you tuning in from Bullshare, Texas. Again, no matter where you are from the US, we are live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So please feel free to send your chat, comments, questions. Please say your name and say where you're from. I'd love to welcome you to the show. And if you're watching the replay later, just know that I do check the comments from time to time, and I will answer your questions. So please don't feel shy. If you have questions, ask them or PM me. I'm happy to answer those as well. Hi, Brian. Great to see you tuning in from Sugar Land, Texas. So let's talk about what is it that will help you network in the hashtag new normal. Now, the good news is this won't last forever. The bad news is it's not. We're not seeing the backside of this as quickly as possible. True story, when this first started happening, I was thinking, oh, okay, we'll wrap this up around June. Yeah, that wasn't realistic at all. In fact, so we are looking at going into 2021 very hopefully and anticipating some sort of change, hopefully something better and an improvement. But it's really hurting people. They don't understand quite how to network in disconnected and disrupted times where we're not meeting in person. How do you do that? I have a surprising, shocking insight for you. Did you realize that your network is not solely dedicated to in-person meetings? In fact, most of the networking that you do, even pre-pandemic, was not necessarily in person, not the strategic networking. Okay, so let's talk about strategic networking versus just regular old networking. What's the difference? The difference is strategic networking has a focus on where you're going with your career. Networking, just regular old networking, going to networking events, professional organizations, meetings, parties, etc. Particularly this time of year, coming with the holidays, there's lots of holiday parties. The best time of year to network and grow your connections. That was more of a grab bag mentality, right? If you go somewhere and you're not quite sure what you're going to get, but you're going to get something, And a lot of people treated it like a card collecting contest. And that's really not what networking is about. But it's a little difficult to be very strategic when you're not quite sure who's going to be there. So you're really just going to see what happens and who you can meet, because you never know. And there's huge validity in that, and a lot of great insights and a lot of great connections you can make. In fact, some of the best professional connections I have made is just through random chance meetings at professional organizational networking events, right? So those are great. And the challenge right now is they're all virtual. Super awkward. Not very easy to network with other people. Now, for those people who are organizing these events, hint, hint, leverage breakout rooms or smaller groups to empower the people who are attending these events to actually meet one another. However, the thing about virtual networking, let's just say general networking, you go to a virtual happy hour to meet other people, you have to be very intentional about it. So not enough to just show up and say hi on camera. You actually do have to have an action item or a call to action from that networking event. Let's just say you meet one or two people. That's the other thing about virtual networking. The likelihood of you meeting a lot of different people is probably not high. You'll probably only make a connection, maybe 2 or 3 different people. But make an action with that person to follow up after the event. Here's why. When we're in the virtual space, our brains don't release the same kinds of chemicals like oxytocin that makes us feel good and also helps us build relationships. The problem with that is in the virtual environment, it takes much, much longer for you to develop a sense of connection and build credibility and trust with this individual. So that know-like trust factor just takes a little bit longer. And you have to be a little bit more intentional about it. So it does take more effort on your part. While back in the day, if you will, when we went to a general networking event, we could say, oh, hi, Eddie. Hey, collect your card. Yeah, we'll touch base. Oh, you go to that Toastmasters meeting. I'll go to that Toastmasters meeting. One of the best connections I ever made was with a gentleman named Eddie at a random general networking event. And he recommended going to a certain Toastmasters club. And I did. It was great. Loved it. Perfect. And I got to further my relationship and connection with Eddie through the Toastmasters event. So it was very good, but now it's harder to do that. So we need to be more intentional about what that might that look like. Well, you could say, hey, connection that I just met, and I want to further your connection, particularly if you're in where that strategic career path, like where am I headed with my career? If you're in that stream, probably definitely want to make time for this person. Virtual coffee chat. Set up a time to talk via Zoom, Google Hangouts, WhatsApp, whatever works for you, to get to know this person. Just know it will take a lot longer to build that know-like trust factor. And ask certain strategic questions that elicit a response from them so you will understand what is meaningful to that person. This is important because in order to build that know-like trust factor in the virtual space, we need to be able to give more than we receive in the beginning. So if you know what that person likes, maybe you send them an article or a video or a TEDx or whatever, or a copy of this live event because you know it's meaningful for them. And you'll say, hey, I was just thinking about you. I know you're looking for this sort of information or you're interested in whatever it is. Here's some information. And you're staying top of mind with that individual, particularly if they happen to be a decision maker or connected to decision makers. So hopefully that gives you an idea what that general networking might look like in the virtual space. Hi, Jonathan. Good to see you tuning in from Cyprus. Jennifer, great to see you tuning in from Jersey Village. Sandy from Cyprus as well. And Cornetia, always good to see you. So again, if you're just tuning in, say hi, say your name. If you have questions about virtual networking, what are your roadblocks? I'd love to hear from you, those of you who are tuning in via LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. What are your roadblocks when it comes to virtual networking, particularly those general networking events, or just reaching out to a connection cold that you know strategically will help you in your job search or your career growth, right? So let me know what questions you have, what roadblocks might be standing in your way, or what do you struggle with? And a lot of people struggle with that cold connection. So let's just say that you know that you're very interested in a certain company or a certain type of role, or maybe you're pivoting your career path into something slightly new, and you know you need to build your network in that space. And you don't know a lot of people. And guess what? You made this decision after the pandemic. Well, don't worry, it's not too late. Just know it takes time. That's another thing about networking. In general, overall, networking as a whole, while very valuable because your connections are your career currency, it does take a little bit longer. Okay, so be patient with your network. Your network is not a one and done kind of thing. You can't just reach out to somebody and they go, oh yeah, I have this thing, and then you're done. It doesn't always work like that. In fact, most of the time, it takes quite some time to bear fruit. And oftentimes what that looks like, if you're a job seeker, for instance, you might say, hey, I'm looking for data analyst roles and such. Okay, great, to your network. And your network goes out and they're thinking about that. And then something runs across their radar and they're like, you know, Sam is looking for this data analyst role. I should put them in touch. And that's how it works. So it's not planned. It's very organic, very happenstance, and totally up to chance, but also very powerful. So you definitely want to leverage that network. Now, strategic networking is very intentional, even more intentional than general networking. If you go to some sort of happy hour on Zoom or what have you, even more intentional. So you are either reaching out to a key decision maker or a professional that's well known or has a lot of great connections that's in the career path that you want to pursue. Now, ideally, you have an idea of what that target is, because if you don't, we need to talk about career clarity and not networking, because you need to be very clear of what your target is to help plan that strategic move. Basically, you want to start with the end in mind. And once you know what your end goal is, that'll give you a great idea who can help you get there. What professional organizations might you want to join? And by the way, in these days and times, it's not good enough just to join a professional organization. You have to volunteer. If you really want to build your network very quickly and much bigger, I highly recommend volunteering with a professional organization. It will help you tremendously if you're thinking particularly about making a pivot, all right? So you're reaching out to somebody you've never met. What do you say? Okay, well, that depends on who you're reaching out to. If you're reaching out to someone who you want to build that connection or further that relationship because they are a professional that's well known, they have a great network, and is in your career stream or your career target area, then you probably want to say something along the lines of flattery. I've noticed that you're well respected in the space. I'd love to connect with you. I'm considering pivoting my career into this space, and I'd love to learn from you. Or just further our connection. Would that be okay if we connect? Nothing pushy, very easy. And also keep in mind, if you're doing this via LinkedIn, not everybody connects with their LinkedIn account all the time. So don't feel put out if that person doesn't get back to you right away. Okay, some people are not as active on LinkedIn as you are. So hi, Denise, tuning in. She's also a Daybreakers Toastmaster member. And I'm sure, Denise, are you still holding an office with Daybreakers Toastmasters? A great way to build your network. So let me know again, what's your roadblocks? What do you struggle with when it comes to virtual networking? For some people, it's how you show up online. Yeah, this little box, not a super comfortable space for everybody. And that's perfectly fine. More comfort comes with practice. I will share with you a little secret. I used to hate being in front of a camera like this. Yeah, not my favorite thing. I'm an in-person person, right? I love going to do speaking events and meeting people in person. But that's just not in the cards right now. And that's fine. So I knew I needed to pivot and move into a place of discomfort temporarily. And quite frankly, being in front of a camera is never that comfortable. Okay. I don't know why it is that this little object feels very judgy. But anyway, so if you struggle with that, just know that you're not alone. A lot of people do struggle with being in front of a camera. And practice does help tremendously. So here's a few tips. If you are going to virtual networking events or networking via Zoom or doing those virtual coffee chats and reach outs to your network, manage this little box, because this little window is your perception to the world. I'll say this again. We drive our credibility, but we do not determine it. And whatever data comes through this little window is your brand. And guess what? Your brand is your credibility. It's one and the same. It's how other people perceive you. So if you tune into a virtual networking event, or you're doing that virtual coffee chat, or catching up with a network person you can connected with at an event later, and you don't have any facial expression at all, it can be very off-putting. Human beings in a virtual space, we don't have a lot of data points. In person, this is 360-degree experience. I mean, you can hear that little inhale before somebody wants to speak, or, the shift in, how someone's sitting kind of tells you maybe their mood at that moment, or how they responded to something you said. You don't really have that in the virtual space. So you truly do have to use your face a lot more, perhaps, than you're comfortable with, particularly if you identify with being more reserved. If you're a more reserved person, like my husband, for example, he's a deep introvert. He does share a few facial expressions, but it varies from individual to individual. If you don't emote or use your face a lot, I would encourage you to practice doing that a little bit more. Here's why. Okay, so it's basically boils down to data. If you're not giving people information, then that leaves a gap. The problem with that gap, whether that's in person or virtual, is other people don't like that gap of knowledge. In fact, our brain just can't handle that. That has to fill the gap. And what does it fill it with? Its own data, not your data, because you're not giving any. Its own data, which is called an assumption. So other people will assume what you're feeling. And if they don't know you very well, that assumption might be way off, which could hurt how you build that relationship. Make sense? So again, I'm not asking you to be a clown in this little box, but I encourage you to emote more in this space to give people more data points so they have an idea of how you're feeling and responding, whether that's heads nods, using your eyebrows, smiling, etc. Using your hand. I use my hands all the time. Like if you tied my hands, I probably couldn't talk. Which freaks my camera out. It doesn't know where to focus, but regardless. Anyway, it also makes it a lot more interesting to connect with someone who gives you something to work with. Makes sense? So we've got a few questions. Well, let me answer those. Let's see. Jonathan says, starting a conversation, job-related, with someone you've never met or never talked to before, even if that person is connected to you. So this is probably one of his roadblocks, because that's what I asked for. What's your top roadblocks? Are you dealing with? So starting a conversation, job-related or otherwise, quite frankly, with someone you've never talked to or never met before, even if they're already connected with you. And probably a lot of us are connected to a lot of people that we've never spoken to. And that's fine. There's nothing technically wrong with that. Okay? Now, if you are starting a conversation in person, it's a little bit easier. When it's not in person, whether it's in-mail, email, instant messaging, whatever that looks like, might be a little different. So rule number one, when you're starting a conversation and you're already connected, have a purpose. Don't just say, hi, how are you doing? That's a little weird. I've had people reach out to me on LinkedIn and go, hi, how are you? And I'm like, I don't know what to say. Fine, how are you? What are we talking about? Give them some context. Give them an idea what the focus of that conversation is. What do you want to know? What do you want to learn? Are you looking to further connection via a virtual chat? Now, if you're chatting on screen, it probably will flow a little bit better. But again, you want to have a purpose for the conversation, and ideally have communicated that purpose to the individual you're talking to. The last thing we want to do, and I think most of you will probably agree, is show up to a meeting, whether that's personal or professional, and not have any idea what you're talking about or for. Make sense? So give that person something to sink their teeth into so they can be prepared if they're that personality that likes to prepare before a conversation or meeting with someone. So have an agenda. And it's nothing wrong with having an agenda when you talk to somebody. Why else are you having a conversation? Even when I talk to my husband, it's usually because I want to know something or tell him something he did wrong. I'm kidding. So, Venice, immediate past present. Okay, so good. I knew you were the president, Venice, of the Daybreakers Toastmaster chapter for a while. Good morning, someone from LinkedIn. Good morning, Rick from Magnolia. Great to see you tuning in. Thank you very much. And if sometimes LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube doesn't show me your name, so please do pop your name in there because I'd like to welcome you to the show. Again, what are your top questions? What do you struggle with the most when it comes to leveraging your network during these challenging times? Now, there is something a lot of people don't think about doing. Email. Yes, that's right. Just email people. You know what's interesting? We tend to look at change and challenging times as a reason to worry about how things should move forward. I'm not saying that everything's going to be smooth sailing. However, it also gives you a purpose and a reason for reaching out to people that you probably haven't done such a great job of reaching out to earlier, right? It happens to all of us. We get busy and our network goes cold. I always say keep your network warm like good coffee because it makes things a lot easier and people feel like you are invested in them and care about them. Now, here's the thing. When you talk about networking, it's not all about what's in it for you. That cannot be all about that. Now, some people have asked me, well, Erin, I don't feel like I have anything to give people. You would be surprised. Okay, so don't sell yourself short. Ask. If you are asking for a favor or asking to be kept in mind for some specific type of opportunity, ask the person, please let me know what I can do for you to help you thrive or support you at the highest level or achieve your goals or whatever language makes sense for you. Okay, and use your email to those people who you're already connected to and you have spoken to in the past, but maybe you haven't done such a great job lately of keeping up with them. Send them an email. Particularly if you're looking for new opportunities, it's a great reason, and right now is a good time to do that. The holidays are coming up. Great time to reach out to people. Send cards. I know. If you have addresses, send cards to people. Now, most people are working remotely and you probably don't have their personal address, but if you do, feel free to send a card. It's a great way for those people who are a little bit closer in your network to feel like you care, which is very important. Okay, and make it personal. If you're sending a card, make it personal. Thinking of you during this time, hope you're well. Don't also say, I'm looking for an opportunity. You don't want to do that. You can say, would you like to catch up via virtual coffee sometime? Right? So that then gives you an opportunity to have a second conversation with that person. Same thing via email. If you want to just email and you don't want to do a virtual catch-up, which is totally optional, I do recommend it though, because quite frankly, people need to hear something more than once. But if you're sending an email to your network, you can say something personal as an opener, of course, and then mention what you're looking for. If you're open for new opportunities, say, hey, I'm open for these types of opportunities. Keep it short and very specific because people will not remember a lengthy diatribe of what you're looking for. Be specific, okay? Very short. People cannot remember all this. They have a lot of their own things going on. Don't think they're going to remember everything about you. So we need to make sure we're very specific to our network when we send it in an email or an in-mail. If you choose to do that, I prefer email if you have their email address. It's a little bit more personal, particularly if you've already spoken with this individual. If you haven't, we'll talk about that in a moment. So that email can say something personal, again, what specific type of opportunity you're looking for, and just something simple as, if something runs across your radar, I'd love for you to keep me in mind, or whatever language works for you. And what can I do for you to help you during these times? and be prepared to follow through on their ask, right? As long as it's reasonable. If they say, well, I would really like $1 million, you can laugh and say, well, I don't really have $1 million, or maybe you do. But regardless, that might not be a reasonable request. So, what questions do you have so far? I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to answer those questions. Now, for those people who you have never met before, ever, and you're reaching out for the first time, you can certainly send them an email. I will share with you, though, if someone has connected with me on LinkedIn and then sends me an email, if it's of a salesy nature, you get unsubscribed immediately. I know that most of you tuning in will not do that regardless. So it's not terrible to do that. It's not terrible to send someone an email that you connected to on LinkedIn that you've never met before. And I'll tell you why. Well, quite frankly, not everybody checks their InMail. And as somebody who gets a lot of InMail, I will share with you that InMail is not well managed. You have one inbox, no way to manage anything, flag anything, label anything. You can archive things, but that's about it. So things get buried very quickly. And if that person you're reaching out to is not someone who connects with their LinkedIn profile very often, So you could send them an email that says, hey, I'd like to further our connection, our conversation, give them a purpose, and then say, I will send you an email, hope you don't mind. And then follow that up with an email that furthers that little opening, right? That's just in case. You never know. They might be a rampant LinkedIn user, and I hope they are, but they may not be. And that email might get to them a little bit faster. That's also a little bit more personal, and people don't do that as much. Now, here's something else you can do. While physical cards during the holidays are a great way to keep your network warm, digital cards aren't bad either. I will be honest with you, though, I prefer in-person cards much more than digital cards, just because they're, I don't know, it's that warm fuzzy, right? You definitely get that warm fuzzy feeling with an in-person card. And a digital card, and my mother sends them, is kind of like, oh, okay. But it's better than nothing, and particularly if you've attached something that might be meaningful to that person. So what other questions and comments we have? Hi, Mark, tuning in from Fort Worth. Let's see. Rick says, InMail to past managers, why does the conversation shut down after the niceties when I mention I'm seeking for work? Let's talk about the psychological roadblock that a lot of previous people that we worked with before. So to answer your question, Rick, it's not you. It's not personal. When one has been, let's just say let go or laid off, or you're in transition for whatever reason, past managers, particularly if they're at that company that you just left, there is an awkwardness. Even people who you considered really close in your network at work at the time sometimes don't feel comfortable furthering that relationship. It is an unfortunate byproduct of the situation. One of the reasons why is because of something called survivor guilt. It's a very prevalent and also very sabotaging hiccup, and it comes from our neuro system, our brain, our limbic cortex. So it's not you, it's not personal, they don't have anything against you at all, but they feel guilty and they're not quite sure what to do about it or how to process it. And they don't even realize that that's what's going on. So they avoid. It's quite common. It's not you and it's not personal. The other potential reason is because they may not have any way to help you, and they don't know how to say that either. A lot of people struggle with disappointment or doling out disappointment, particularly right now. So let's have some heart-to-heart talk really quickly about what's going on in the job market right now. So for all of you tuned in, let's talk about some of the Current trends in the job market. Well, right now, historically, we see a slight uptick right before the holidays for immediate hire positions. We did see a few of those in September, but strangely enough, they are trickling off depending on the industry, of course, that you are seeking. But predominantly, the job market is well below normal, and that's even abnormal after the summer because typically the summer has less opportunities than the fall. Historically, that's always been the case. Right now, in the last couple of weeks, the job market has it's crickets out there. Why? Well, the reason why we are extrapolating is because of the election. It's an election year. It is a tumultuous, emotionally charged event, and businesses are not quite sure what will be the result of whatever happens. They are hedging their bets and holding their cards close to their chest, to use a gaming terminology. In other words, they're waiting and seeing. They are not quite sure what the economy will do or what our culture will do or the repercussions of whatever happens, so they're playing a wait and see game. Unfortunate for most job seekers. You don't really want to hear that, but just know that this too shall pass. It is a temporary thing, and it's not personal. It is oftentimes because companies, quite frankly, don't know how the economy will perform. And a lot of them moving into 2021 will be looking for contract positions. So if you're okay with contract in any sense of the word, please do and follow or be open to that, because the quote unquote gig economy that sort of raised its head a couple of years ago and slunk off and we didn't hear about it, well, that's back, very firmly back. And there's multiple reasons why. A lot of businesses are understanding that the economy has its swings and roundabouts. And when the economy ticks down, they don't like laying off people, particularly full-time individuals. It's much easier when you are just a contract employee. It's unfortunate, but that is the quote unquote new normal for the foreseeable future. Even large companies like Exxon, for example, they have been doing more contract work over the last couple of years. And moving forward, if any of these major organizations will be hiring, that would definitely be contract positions. So let's also talk real talk about oil and gas, because a lot of you probably are attached to oil and gas in some form or fashion. Oil and gas, the original prediction was that we might see an upswing late Q1, Q2. The latest report on that is not rosy and sunshine at all. In fact, we're looking at a much later potential swing back into the market. So what's going on in that space? Well, oil and gas, you can expect a few things in the future of work. Number one, more contract work, as I just mentioned. So that will be coming. Number two, oil and gas will not be paying the salaries that it used to. That's right. So for those of you stinking lucky enough to have a job with oil and gas and you want a salary raise, don't get your hopes up and don't hold your breath. Because oil and gas right now cannot operate in the global climate with the overhead operating costs that has historically drug along behind it, it's hurting. And in order to play in a global market, they have to drop their overhead cost. And in order to do that, guess what? That will hit the average employees as well. Now, there's other ways that they can save money. I know very well as a continuous improvement employee in corporations working for oil and gas. However, this tends to be the first focus that they have, is making sure that they're not paying very much in salary. So expect the future of work to have salaries in oil and gas trend down towards a more normal. So the bubble for oil and gas salaries is firmly burst. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the good news is if you're open to contract work, you will be able to get more work more quickly. And there's a lot more remote work than there ever was before. Even jobs that were traditionally, you have to go into the office, they're really considering keeping those remote for the foreseeable future. So if that works with you and your personality style and your work style, then that's a great thing. And there are remote work sites out there. And we'll be probably talking about that in a future Career Coffee Chat show in more detail. So what other questions do you have? I want to make sure that I cover all those with you today when it talks about networking in the new normal and what your network can do for you and what it doesn't. So let's talk about that really quickly before we wrap up our show. So if you do have any questions, please put those in the chat and in the comments. So what does your network do for you and what doesn't it do? Well, a lot of people think that your network is really there for you when you are looking for a new job. Guess what? Not necessarily. I'm not saying it doesn't, but that's not the real purpose of your network. The reason you have a network is, yes, so you can expand and elevate your career and find more opportunities, but it's not for the standard quote unquote job seeking experience. And I'm not saying it doesn't help in that space, but that's really not what your network ideally should be used for. Ideally, so let's talk ideal. What does that look like? Ideally, you should be keeping your network warm, continually investing in it, continually reaching out to people, having coffee chats, getting to know people, building up that connection and relationship, that connection currency with your career. And then as you do that, you start to build your influence. That's right. I use the word influence. Why did I use that word? Well, quite frankly, moving forward, particularly as we're doing more remote work, it'll be more difficult for you as a professional to get noticed because we're not in person as much anymore. And quite frankly, most people are very bad at doing this anyway, reaching outside of their box and reaching out to more people, working through their organizations. And whether that's something super awkward as doing a presentation in your skill level or on your expertise, or whether that's writing an article or just sharing content or connecting other people. It doesn't really matter, but you definitely want to grow your influence. Here's why. The more you grow your influence and the more people you connect to and have those robust connections, not just a card collecting contest, those opportunities will ideally reach out to you. And when you do, let's just say, find yourself at a need to find another job, the cycle is much shorter because these people already invested in you because you've invested in them. Make sense? Now, let's just say that you do like most people and you get busy, you're in a perfectly fine job, you don't need your network. You always need your network. But you don't feel like you do because you're busy and you let your network go cold. Just know that it takes a longer time for that to spin up. Okay? And the worst thing you can do, ladies and gentlemen, is once you get that network spun up, is to let it go cold again. So I encourage you to keep your network warm. Your connections define your career growth, your relationships, those one-off chance meetings. You never know where something might lead. And you definitely want to always be investing in that because it will continually be a return on your investment. Ideally, you want to be reached out to for positions, not the other way around. And in order to do that, that takes a continual investment on your part in your network. So a lot of times people link networking with job seeking. Well, that's not really what a network is for. It's not that you can't leverage it for that, but it's for something much bigger. It's for your holistic career growth, your holistic career elevation. I can't speak today. It's for that at a bigger level, not just job seeking. Because if you use it just for job seeking, the chances of you just dropping it and forgetting about it when you find a job are pretty high. And then you're back into having to spin up the whole network again when you're looking for another job. No, always keep it warm. Always. And that way, potentially, people might be reaching out to you. Maybe you are a couple of years into a job and someone says, hey, are you interested in such and such? We've got this so-and-so position over here. And you're like, yeah, because I'm not really going where I want to go in this position, right? So that's how you want your network to work for you. All right. So let's see, what other questions do we have? We'll be wrapping up just a few moments. If you haven't already, please do check out the Career Coffee Chat podcast. And you can also find this show as well as my Career Coffee Chat podcast episodes on the Career Coffee Chat LinkedIn page. Yes, that's right. It has its own page. So you can find it easily there. Let's just say missed the show today, you couldn't tune in, or LinkedIn didn't notify you, or you want to share that with someone and you're not quite sure where to find it, I do recommend sharing the show. If you like this show, share it with your network and spread the good news. And you can find that on the Career Coffee Chat page on LinkedIn. So you can find this show, and you can also look at past shows as well and other episodes. All right. Rick says, are there still career fairs, or is that mainly for boom times? Career fairs are a little awkward right now. I have seen something like that, like people are trying out new things around career fairs and job search fairs or job fairs. I'll just be honest with you, Rick. Those job fairs, particularly for an experienced professional, they're not very useful. So I wouldn't say that they would help you tremendously. Leverage your network, leverage your resume that's applicant tracking system friendly, and work LinkedIn in your favor. Now let's talk a little bit about LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is extremely important for your networking. Now let's talk about how that works for you. You need to be live or on LinkedIn, leveraging LinkedIn 2 to 3 days a week at least, or LinkedIn considers you a non-active user. You don't want to be a non-active user, and I'll tell you why. Because recruiters have a feature called LinkedIn Recruiter, and LinkedIn, of course, rewards those people who are more active on LinkedIn. So let's just say you're not very active, if at all. You just show up on LinkedIn, look around, like a few things, and leave. Well, you won't rank very high in the job search. So when they do a search for potential candidates, you won't show up very high on that. By the way, having a premium account has nothing to do with your rankings when you show up on a recruiter search in LinkedIn. Nothing to do with it. Premium allows you to send more in-mails, it allows you to do more searches, and that sort of thing. It doesn't really do anything for your ranking when recruiters are searching for ideal candidates. What does matter is how active you are on LinkedIn, and also whether you have the open to work feature turned on. So what does active look like? Well, particularly if you're thinking about making a career pivot, or even if you're not, you want to share information based on your career trajectory and comment on professionals in that career trajectory that you want to further your relationship with that individual to stay top of mind. Liking is not enough, unfortunately. And I know that a lot of you are thinking, oh, geez, I have to do this. It's a necessary part of being in the quote-unquote new normal, because we are not in person with people anymore. And if you don't have an online presence, you tend to disappear. And we don't want that either, okay? Jonathan just shared, do you search in professional chapters or church? So yes, professional chapters help very well, particularly, say, for example, the Society of Mechanical Engineers, for example. If they have job postings, they will share that. And it's pretty thin upon the ground right now, so don't get discouraged if there's not a lot to look for. So if you have any other questions about networking, or networking in the new normal, or how to reach out to people, or what do I say, or what do I do when this person said this, or they're not responding to me, don't take it personal. What do you do? Please pop it in the chat or the comments if you're watching the replay later. As always, it's been a very big pleasure to tune in with you on the Career Coffee Chat show. And like I mentioned before, if you haven't seen the podcast or listened to the podcast, please feel free to tune into that. The link is in this event description, so you can find that, or you can find it on the Career Coffee Chat page on LinkedIn. So either one's available. And remember, stay focused, my friends. Keep a great mindset, because the narrative you tell yourself will define your experiences. And if you want to reach out to me, feel free to do so. Again, my name is Aaron Urban. I'm a certified career strategist and executive coach, and I look forward to speaking with you next time. Ta-ta for now.